Hi everyone, welcome to Active Self-Protection Extra and talking today with attorney extraordinaire Tim Forshee. We had another sovereign citizen on the channel.
Love those guys.
And I want to talk a little bit about, do I have to hand over my ID? Do I have to get out of the car? But Tim has dealt with sovereign citizens in an official capacity 3 times.
Yep.
I need to hear story time. To win the fight after the fight, you need help. After a use of force, I trust Firearms Legal Protection to help me win the fight for the rest of my life. From their 24/7 attorney-answered hotline to coverage for the use of all legal tools, Firearms Legal Protection has you covered. Get a discount by signing up at the link below. Do tell.
Well, 2 times when I was a judge, I dealt with them.
No
and then
way.
1 time when I was in court as a litigant, and coincidentally, a good friend, a dear friend of my wife's, and a good friend of mine was the judge, and she had to deal with a guy that was a sovereign
We're
citizen.
talking the whole maritime laws,
You have
fringe
no,
flag.
exactly. They start talking about the Articles of Confederation, and you have no jurisdiction, and blah blah blah. And you know, we had a guy that sir, please state your name. It was like Mr. X. I said, okay, sir, do you have any ID to verify for me that I don't have to show you ID. This is in court, you know, and I'm just like, oh boy. And we went to a seminar about how to deal with this stuff, and it still doesn't prepare you.
The
It's
sovereign
just
citizens,
insane.
they're sorted into Hogwarts houses. They have magic spells.
Exactly.
But they're like, you know, listen, because of my magic spell.
Yeah, I owe nothing to society. Well, you drove on a road to get here, yes, and the stoplights that you encountered may have saved your life from somebody coming the other direction, and you have a national defense, and your mom's on Social Security, and it's like you're saying, they just pick and choose, and it's just this. I hate to say it, but it's like
I'm not driving, I'm traveling.
One of my favorite protest songs from the '60s, signs. And
Everywhere
most of the
there's
signs
signs.
just say, "Look at my sign," and this is just a.
And it's a long-haired, freaky person.
Yeah, it's another way for them to get attention. It's another way for them to be different and stand out from the crowd and look at me. I think that's a lot of times the mindset we see.
Yeah.
And clearly there's no legal basis for that. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to pay taxes. Okay, well then you're going to go to jail. You don't have to pay taxes, but you have to choose between paying taxes and go to jail at some point. So if that's your choice, then we'll be happy to accommodate you and send you to jail. But you don't get to opt out of jail because you say so. You don't get to refuse to give an ID to a police officer who has reasonable suspicion because you say so. And this guy learned that lesson the hard way. He didn't learn it for very long. He learned it for maybe 10 seconds, but he learned it.
Yeah,
So,
He paid the hard way for that lesson again. And my worry about this is when you see Officer P. Barnes and some guy get tased, okay, that's one thing.
Yep.
But my worry is there's this radicalized fringe, and that's where the sovereign citizens are. They end up being the radicalized fringe.
Yep.
Okay, and I say that as a guy, like, I'm a kind of a wackadoodle libertarian personally, and so like I feel like
a little fringy.
A little fringy. Like,
Nothing wrong with a little fringe.
I feel sometimes I go, I understand why they're so mad. I understand what the frustration is.
Who doesn't feel terrible when you write your tax bill? We all feel terrible about certain things about
pay
society.
taxes because I don't want to get locked in a cage.
Yeah.
But like, okay, when a police officer pulls you over, and in this case it was a legal stop, do you have to give them your ID?
Yes. It's A, statutory, and B, a lot of people don't realize this. We all say this, but nobody realizes what it means. Driving is a privilege.
I hate that. It's not true.
And that means, and a lot of people don't even remember signing this, but when you sign the documents in order to get your driver's license, you are consenting to certain rules, right? You're consenting that if a police officer has probable cause to believe that I was intoxicated while I was operating my vehicle, I voluntarily agree for my license to be suspended. You don't have to be convicted of a DUI to lose your license. A lot of people don't realize that because you've already entered into that compact with the state in order to get the privilege to drive. And so one of the other, in addition to it being a statutory requirement, is you have a driver's license. And so you're required to produce that driver's license when an officer, in the reasonable course of their job, with reasonable suspicion that a crime may have been committed, asks for your ID. You're required to give your name and your ID. You're not required to answer any other questions. Why'd you make that left turn? You can be completely silent to that. But you do have to identify yourself and provide ID. It is required by the law.
So ID, yes. I would argue the driver's licenses are an unconstitutional infringement on the right to free travel, but that's something that's an Overton window question for another day.
Then again, you're operating a motor vehicle in violation of the statutes and you're under arrest.
Yeah, so that being, we need to change the laws. The laws as they
That's-
currently exist.
Exactly. If you
Driving
don't like
is-
the laws, get them changed. Right?
Driving is treated as a privilege.
Yep.
Just like concealed carry is treated as a privilege, and that's wrong.
And that is in the Constitution, it turns out. So, yeah.
Turns out,
Yeah.
right? So anyways, so you do have to give your ID. Officer decides to make you step out of the car. Says, I would like you to step out of the car. Are you required to step out of the car?
Yes, if they have a reasonable suspicion that a crime, for their own safety, or that a crime may have been committed. And by the way, people all the time will define probable cause, define reasonable suspicion. Probable cause, you can probably sit and talk for an hour and try to give a definition for. Reasonable suspicion, I always tell people, reasonable suspicion exists if a cop says they have a reasonable suspicion.
They believe crime is afoot.
Prove that they didn't believe that, right? I mean, so they have to be able to say that, but guess what? They know to say that. So
Evidence that crime is afoot.
if a cop asks you to step out and they pat you down, it's legal. Shut up.
Well,
and, it's going to happen.
And the step out thing, Pennsylvania versus Mims has established this for decades. Okay, so this is long established case law.
It was in the 70s.
70s, I believe. Mm-hmm. I don't know the exact year, but and so listen, they can perform a perfunctory pat down, a external pat for weapons. They can't turn your pockets inside out and all that stuff. But here's my big thing. So is it legal for the cop to ask for your ID? Yes. Mm-hmm. And if you choose not to give one, now you're violating the law. I want you to step out of the car for my own safety. Why? Why would they do that? Because they worry that you've got guns and crap in the car, or that you've got one on your person and that you're a threat to them because you're being combative.
A lot of times people refer to that as a Terry stop. There's a famous Supreme Court's Terry versus State of Ohio, where that for the officer's own safety, they have the ability to pat you down for weapons. So it's going to happen.
And it's called a Terry frisk,
right?
And that's legal.
Yep.
So if it happens, I want you to not fight the cop on the roadside.
Yep.
That's the bottom line. Now, could this guy be worried that, wait, I do have a gun on my hip, I'm unlicensed in this state, I'm gonna get hemmed up for that? Okay, maybe you are. Is that preferable to being dead?
Yeah, you're going to draw a gun with 7 cops with guns drawn? I mean,
stupid.
That was suicide. That's all it was suicide. Yeah. And it's just a wonder, as you guys pointed out in the video, that some cop wasn't hit as well.
Holy Moses.
Because, wow, it was what we used to call a Mexican firing squad. But, wow. I mean, this guy, I don't know that he was consciously wanting to commit suicide by cop, but that was the inevitable outcome of this.
So, and listen, and there's also, I think the most interesting part of that video was the task saturation the officer that had the malfunction had. That was
cleared it pretty quick. Yeah.
It cleared it, but everyone else is calling ceasefire, but he's so involved in the clearance problem, bang, when everybody else had stopped.
Yep.
Again, not maliciously, but because I'm so engrossed in this task. And I know I have to fire more rounds, that go signal had already been sent.
That's why about, I don't know, when I started being taught this and started teaching this, but we used to call it a tap, rack, bang. It's a clear type 1 malfunction. It's called a tap, rack, assess. Okay, you don't fire automatically. And if you train tap, rack, bang, 10,000 times, guess what you're going to do? Yeah. You're going to tap, rack, bang.
Tap, rack, and bang.
That's what we saw this gentleman do. So, yeah.
So, again, one more time. If a cop pulls you over or is, investigating a crime, I need to see your ID, please. I will say there is a big difference between I need to see your ID and may I see your ID, please. Yes. So when he asks the question, do you have any ID on you? Right? Yes, I do. May I see it? No. No, give me your ID. That's a command.
I mean, any cop will tell you it's ask, tell, make.
Yeah. Now again, if you're just in a casual conversation with an officer says, can I see your ID, please? That's a request.
I love it when people say, do you know how to spell your name? I always say yes.
No. I do.
I most certainly do.
However, you don't want to be a smart ass either.
And you don't want to be a smart ass to a cop either. So what John's saying is absolutely correct, but I think that's probably going to piss cops off often.
Give an ID. Okay, here's my ID. Yep. You bet. Again, if he says, I'd like you to step out of the car. Now, what have I done? What have I done? Tell me my crime. You're going to get in trouble, friends. Don't do it.
One thing a lot of people fail to remember too, I think we've talked about this before, is that I think you have. I've done traffic stops. I'm an auxiliary. I'm a volunteer for the Rangers. I was a volunteer for the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office before that. I've done traffic stops, and I will tell you, and any cop who's honest will tell you, it's scary to do a traffic stop. 25% of all cops are killed during routine traffic stops. Yep. You walk up and knock on that window, you have no idea what's going to face you when that window rolls down. It is scary. So cops are scared. How do people act when they're scared? Short-tempered, loud, aggressive, right? Does anybody besides me know somebody who jacked somebody in a haunted house? The goblin jumped out at them and they punched them in the face. Yeah. I mean, we do irrational things when we're scared, and cops are scared during traffic stops. So I always tell people, don't be a smart ass, don't be aggressive, don't be rude, be hyper polite, be hyper aware of the situation. Roll all of your windows down, put your hands on the steering wheel, turn the interior light off, and start, turn your stupid radio off. Yeah. And people they antagonize cops, and guess what? It goes sideways. So
crazy.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Don't be a sovereign citizen. Okay, your magic spells don't work.
Or if you do, just maybe infiltrate them like you're infiltrating the Klan, and then give us some good stories.
Yes.
Yeah,
Again,
wow, these people are, talk about fringe, they're so fringe.
Your magic spells don't work. Your Articles of Confederation are not valid.
The sorting hat sorted you into the wrong house.
Sorted you into the wrong house, okay? Negative 10 points to Gryffindor, all right? Don't do it. And it ends up, I mean, we laugh about it, but it ends up with a guy radicalized to the point that he dies by suicide by cop. Yep. You know, he just decides to go down in a blaze of glory rather than have an ID and take the freaking ticket.
And I don't want to sound like a judgmental jerk here, which means I'm about to be a judgmental jerk, but wouldn't you just bet a lot of money that this guy had about an 85 IQ?
Yeah.
And people had filled his head with this, and to where he was indoctrinated and believed it. And that makes me very sad, because he's getting all this probably off the internet, or maybe there's some local church meeting or whatever, but this is a guy who's malleable and impressionable and probably not very bright, and people have turned him into this, and it caused his death. And that's sad. I mean, this guy wasn't thinking for himself.
And I just encourage everyone, man. So sovereign citizens are ones that we tend to laugh at as an indoctrinated, radicalized person, right? But you know, the worst example of an indoctrinated, radicalized person in the U.S. would be Tim McVeigh. The guy who, Murrah building murderer. And we've seen others on the left that do that. He was a righty. And so let's reject that. Let's do better. Let's go, I don't want that radicalized, fringe, violent behavior, because innocent people's lives are at stake, and we don't want to do that. Amen. So don't be a sovereign citizen. Your spells don't work.
Be a little fringy. Pierce your nose. God bless you. But yeah.
Purple hair, fine. Sovereign citizen, not so much.
Knock it off.